Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from DeltiaSgaming.com here to explain a beginner build for Black Myth Wukong. Look, if you're unfamiliar with this type of game, don't worry, you're not alone. I'm going to walk you through the various components of what makes a build, give you some options and examples of how to use spells, skills, talents, weapons, relics, and more. Do me a big favor, if you get anything out of this video, hit that thumbs up and subscribe for more. Timestamps are below if you wish to skip ahead, as well as written guide links. Let's get started. So, what makes a build in Black Myth Wukong? Well, it's a bit different and more complex than other games. Essentially, you have a ton of talent trees that are very simple to understand, but oftentimes you have zero idea where to spend your talents and or why. Your sparks are ways to progress your talent trees and are gained by leveling up or meditation spots. So you can expect at least one spark per level, and oftentimes a little bit more depending on how much you explore. Now, I'm using an endgame character for this video at level 71 since there's only one save. However, I have 82 sparks once I reset all my skills. So the first thing to discuss is the spells and the talents associated with them and what you need to focus on. So spells is up first. 82 sparks, I've reset. Here is the interface for the spells. As you start working left to right, you're going to unlock more as you progress in the main story. Story is broken up into chapters. The very first one you get is Immobilize. This, in fact, is one of the best spells in the game, if not the best, because it affects bosses and or any little critter. Now, you can see here we have 50 seconds and we have 50 points. This is mana, the resource it's going to cost to cast this, and this is the time, the duration, and or cooldown. So it's a CC, it's a control spell. You can open with it, but an important part about this is to ensure the spell will not be interrupted during intense combat. Cast it when the opponent is exhausted, staggered, or down. That staggered here is a specific status effect, so the enemy will give a little cue visually that will indicate if they are staggered. That's the optimal time when you want to use it. You can also use it as an opener or as a defense mechanism to kind of peel back, get some space, and heal up if you need to. The thing to be aware here is it does have a long cooldown and a decent amount of mana cost. The cooldown is the biggest issue. You're not going to be able to spam this and just constantly control people. You also have Ring of Fire. So Ring of Fire is a defensive spell. It's going to put this circle down and kind of makes you invulnerable to a couple of specific attacks. A little bit more mana cost, and it has the same cooldown, 50 seconds. This is going to pair well with the Pillar stance, but not nearly as good as Immobilize because it works so well on bosses, not just individual critters. So as beginner, I'd highly recommend focusing on Immobilize and taking some talents early on. So the talent tree is very simple. You take points and you move down the talent tree. Obviously very simple. Now, your level is going to determine which talents you can take and why. Also, when you're speccing and doing your talents, you got to realize you have a ton of options, especially at first. You're going to have your spell talents, you're going to have your staff talents, your focus over here, and you're going to have foundation. So each and every level, you're going to have to make specific choices that is going to be very important for your survivability and damage overall. The overall premise of what you want to do is have a balanced setup, focus primarily on stamina recovery, having immobilized to lock down enemies, stamina regeneration, and then anything like this, Force Unbound, that enables sprinting while charging, mobility. This game is all about dodging and surviving. So anything you can do to optimize those resources is obviously a little bit better than fancy, flashy skills. So going back to immobilizing the skill tree, stagnation is going to extend the duration of this. So if you take multiple points into here, you can stack this effect up to 5 times, allowing you to light attack and just light up an enemy while they're stunned. This is just critical to do free damage, and it applies to bosses. Next up is Crash. Each talent level moderately increases the damage to immobilize enemies. These two are essentially no-brainers. It's going to allow you to lock down an enemy, to do more damage to them, and it's your main control mechanism on any enemy. Now, for a beginner, the rest of these are a bit more complex to execute and not as important to get. So you can get these later on when you have a little bit more talents, but in the beginning, these two are critical to optimizing your crowd control and controlling those bosses. Now, as you progress, you're going to get another spell, and that's going to be Cloud Step. You can also use Rock Solid. So Cloud Step is essentially a mobility tool, but you can use it offensively or defensively. It has a 35-second cooldown and 30 mana. So the mana cost is pretty low, but the cooldown is pretty hefty. What's interesting about this spell is it leaves a decoy. So you can use it and kind of backpedal, and you can use it in conjunction with dodging and or a perfect dodge. That's what makes it helpful, is that when you're low on stamina, you still have this mobility tool that you can use. Okay, so if we look here, my stamina UI is in the bottom left. So as I use attacks, light attacks, I start draining my stamina. That also applies to dodges. You can see my stamina doesn't move that much, and that will be determined by a lot of your gear and talents later on. The blue bar is for the mana. So if I'm going to use Cloud Step, I boom, zoom, and I use the mana, but I see I remain in this cloud for quite a while. Think of it almost like a stealth attack. So you can use it as a way to charge in, as a way to backpedal and survive, and as a way as an offensive tool. It's one of the best spells in the game. So if we go back to the talents for Cloud Step, as a beginner here, a couple of things that are going to be important is increases movement speed in Cloud Step. So remember that when you use this specific spell, you're going to have a few seconds while you're in Cloud Step still. It's not just a once in a use and then all of a sudden it goes away. So increasing mobility is helpful to get in and to get out. This right here is Concealed Observation. Each talent level slightly increases the critical hit chance of Unveiled Strike, which stacks per second while in Cloud Step up to 10 times. This is the offensive piece of Cloud Step that you can use to get a lot of critical. And when it talks about Unveiled Strike, upon returning from the mist state, an Unveiled Strike can be unleashed to catch opponents off guard. So if you want to use this as an opener, this is the specific talent that you're going to want to use. Also, extending the duration can be very helpful. If you're just trying to bait or play defensive, you can use this to have a longer duration inside of the clouds and combine it with Concealed Observation and really make it more of an offensive and or sneak getaway tool. So even the beginning options and beginning talents here are very useful for Cloud Step and one of the best spells in the game. Rock Solid is the alternative. Now, it doesn't have mobility, and you have to time it. The strength of Rock Solid is it's 15 seconds. So your cooldown is very, very low, and 30 mana you can use it very frequently. But you have a very small window to time it. Moreover, it's not mobility focused. This game is all about being mobile, whether it's to charge in, to charge out, because so many of the bosses have large AoE, and if you don't have Cloud Step or constantly dodging and being aware of the boss's mechanics, it will be very punishing. So stick with Cloud Step, take some of the beginning talents and experiment. Next we have Strand. You're gonna get this later. This is a Pluck of Many. So this is kind of an odd thing. Now you look at it, it summons some critters, and initially I thought this was gonna be amazing. The issue with this spell is it has an enormous cooldown and an enormous mana cost. So if you're trying to use Immobilize frequently in conjunction with Cloud Step, it's not gonna be that effective. Moreover, you're going to be stuck into a animation while you're casting this. When you're fighting bosses, you're not going to be able to just willy-nilly sit there for 3 seconds and have this long-winded animation. It can be useful as a defensive mechanism to peel away. It also can be useful before you start the fight, but be cognizant of the mana cost with it. So even if with this guy here, if I use it, that's on cooldown still. Oh my god, it's still on cooldown. You can see here, this thing is still on cooldown even after my lecture for about 2 minutes. It just has an enormous long cooldown. If you like this spell for whatever reason, I would increase the HP and the duration of the duplicates. Ultimately, you're using this as a distraction tool, so the longer they can be distracting for you, the better it can be. But this is one that's going to be used infrequently. Now we get to transformations, and you have a bunch of different options here. Red Tides is my preferred. So it uses what's called Might. So Might cost, that's another unique mechanic that stacks and is different than the Spirit mechanic. All right, if I hit the 4 key, I'm going to turn to this guy and it says light attack, heavy attack, and so on. Realize you can despawn this when you want, but this is something you're gonna activate specifically when you need maybe an elemental damage, like fire damage against a specific boss. You're gonna have a few of these, but this is not gonna be your core gameplay mechanic because your light and heavy attack and focus attacks will be the main thing that you're gonna do with your build. Now you can deactivate it whenever you want with that 4 key and get back at it. So to boost this, you can take more talent levels, which will increase the damage of the next attack after a perfect dodge. Also, be aware of the time it takes to transform into one of these. I like Red Tide because the fire damage, it's going to have a high might cost, but experiment with it. So when you transform, be aware there is a small lag duration, and you're going to have to be aware of that, but this will be another burst mechanism that you can use if you're able to transform without being under pressure. And then if you like the transformations, here are the passives to optimize this. This is not something that I focus on with my builds. So I would say pick one that you like, experiment with it, but don't jump a whole lot of talents into this. So that's going to bring us to the next part of your build, which is going to be the foundations and the staff stances. Let's start with staff stances. Smash stance, by default, is unlocked. So I think level 5 and level 20 or these two are unlocked. So smash stance, the strength of it is it's the mobility stance. So you can charge your heavy attack in smash stance and then unload as you charge. So if we don't take any talents, what this looks like is I hold and then boom, you can see in the bottom right, I had that little icon, that's the focus. So you're going to build up to 4 focus points, which at end game will do more damage depending on your talents and or skills that you're using. So you're primarily holding to unload a super high heavy attack. It does drain your stamina while you're charging and holding it. So the general combination is going to be a couple light attacks, a heavy attack, and or charging this preemptively or during movement mechanics when the boss is away from you to get a focus point so you can do damage. I know there's a lot to explain, hang in there with me. The most important one to unlock right away is enable sprinting while charging. Remember, this game is about mobility and stamina. You only have a couple mechanisms for surviving: dodging, sprinting, and or cloud step. So the more mobility you have, the more you can strafe, kite targets and bosses, the more you will survive. Consider taking this a must. Now you see on the left hand side here, you see focus attack 2. Increases maximum focus points 1 to 2. These are your priorities to advance, specifically taking the smash stance passives and also the passives on the left-hand side here. The more points you have, you can see we'll need 3. So let's take 1, 2, and 3. Now we have this unlocked, and to get to the next level, we're going to have to take focus attack 3. What does this do? It allows us to charge up another attack and get 2 dots. 1, 2, and unload. So you can get up to 4 at endgame. This is a priority because it will do more damage, and the further you advance in the game, the talents will optimize having more stacks of focus. So the game revolves around that heavy attack charging mechanic along with the combos light attack into heavy attack. I know it's confusing, trust me. So what I would do at the beginning of the game is start working on one stance, specifically smash stance. You can unlock pillar and thrust, and then you can swap to them. So switch stance, Z, X, and C. That's kind of a crappy keybind on the PC, but you can see you can swap. In the bottom right corner, the UI will change. So what this essentially does is it changes the heavy attack mechanic. So perch, with pillar here, you go higher up in the air. This is more of a defensive. Very useful for specific ground-based bosses. If they're doing ground damage, very, very useful to avoid attacks. Thrust has a lot more range, but it doesn't have the mobility of smash. So as you charge, you can do a lot of damage at further range, but you're not going to be able to move. Also very useful for particular bosses where it's really hard to get close to. However, smash stance in general is pretty much all you need at the beginning of the game until you're aware of those boss mechanics. So I would advise you is just take at least 1 point into pillar and thrust as you unlock it, experiment with it, but the majority of your talent points should be focused on the smash stance talents along with the passes here to unlock your focus attack 2, 3, and 4. Foundation is up next. These are the passes, and primarily playing the game, you want stamina and survival. Stamina predominantly. These two at the beginning are hyper important. Endurance. Each talent level moderately reduces the stamina cost of sprint. Not as important, but you're going to be sprinting a lot. This also syncs up well with the Force Unbound, enable sprinting while charging, because those are going to be 2 stamina drains on your individual character. So more stamina, max stamina, recovery, and reduced cost, very good for your build. This right here, I can't pronounce it, of course, because it requires reading. Each talent level moderately reduces the stamina cost of dodging. Hyper, 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 hyper important. Take these 2 suckers right away. You can't go wrong with any talent inside of here at all. Usually how the talent trees work is the left-hand side is typically damage reduction, while the right-hand side is typically offensive. Not always, but in general, that's typically how it works. Now you can see survival. This is going to be unavailable to you at much later levels, but they're obviously clear ones that are going to help you. Increase max health. You can't go wrong with that if you have a spark laying around and you feel very squishy. Increase stamina. We've already talked about how important of those are. So don't think in other games like the very last talent of the tree is going to be the most important. Sure, they are very, very powerful, but you have to have a core amount of stamina recovery, and health just to survive basic stuff. If you can survive indefinitely with just minimal talents and passives, then you can use your spells for crowd control, you can use staff heavy attacks for ultimate burst damage, but don't overcomplicate things. The simple things right now are the best for you as a beginner. So if I haven't confused you enough, the beginning, what I would focus on, these very first few talents and stamina, survival, I would focus on smash, getting this up priority number 1. Do not invest in pillar and thrust right away. Pretty much optimize your smash stance and these passives. Remember, passives are active at all times. Some of these skills are only active during very niche specific situation. In the spell specifically, highly recommend Immobilize and Cloud Step. They're going to do great for crowd control and also for survivability. I would skip a Pluck of Many. I would pick 1 transformation or 2 experiment, but I would not spend a lot of investment in them. Okay, there's a lot more to go over with builds if that's not confusing enough yet. We have a couple things to go over, and one is relics. Now, relics are going to come a bit later in the game, and you're going to have like 1 at the very start of the game. So with the relics, you can pick and choose your individual passive by clicking in here and just changing it out. Something to know about critical hit damage is critical hit damage and critical hit chance are pretty low in this game. Unless you're building really into it, your base amount, you can see crit hit chance, whopping 0 burger. Crit hit damage is 130%. That's actually pretty low for most games. So just with beginning gear on, it's not very high. So don't feel like you got to do a ton of crit hit chance unless you build into it, especially crit hit damage and the multiplier being low. So we come to Relic here. Upon a successful hit with Unveiled Strike, the cooldown of the spell is massively reduced. Considerably hit crit hit damage, and considerably increase focus gain upon consecutive light attack hits. Players, this one is going to be very, very good because you want to build that focus that leads into those heavy attack combos, and focus generating and building doing light attacks is a passive way to overall increase your damage. If you're finding that you're using the Cloud Step a lot, Unveiled Strike as a combo and stealth, this Eagle Eye is very good. You will continue to unlock more and more of these. This one, Whistling Wind, is extraordinarily good. Temporarily increase attack after a perfect dodge. So perfect dodge is when you time it, there's a little animation that indicates if you hit a perfect dodge. You're old like me, 40-year-old man, you might not be getting a whole lot of perfect dodges, so you might want to avoid this. But if you have lightning fast reflexes like a 14-year-old chugging down Mountain Dew, this can increase your damage by 20% after a perfect dodge. It's a no-brainer. Now, that wasn't confusing enough. You have 1 more component, if not more, to your build, and that is spirits. After you beat these bosses, you can collect the spirits. So the Rat Governor here, take the form of the Rat Governor and leap and shoot your staff lightning. It's tips to strike at foes dealing thunder damage. So this is going to be another thing that you can activate in combat by pressing F. Now, if you look at this specific skill, it's going to fire a staff. Why this is useful, especially at the start of the game, is you have very little ways to deal with ranged targets. So this can be a way to burst down enemies at range, keeping a safe distance. So when that boss is just about down, you have no way to heal, you have no way to reach out and touch it. This can be useful. Experiment with these and feel free to swap them out. What you need to know about them is they have a passive benefit. So moderately increases thunder damage. So if you're not using this frequently as a burst mechanic, just equip one that augments your builds passively, because those passive and active abilities are really, really important. So this one here, Swift Bat, moderately increases stamina recovery. If you're struggling with stamina, go back in, check your passives, swap it out, and see if this is best for you. But I like the Rat King to reach out and touch some enemies, especially when you're lacking the knowledge of the boss mechanics. Okay, now we're going to talk about gear, and gear's a bit complicated. You can get it through boss drops, but mainly it's all about crafting. The deluxe edition comes with some really good ones to start. Bronze Cloud Staff here, Cloud Pattern Stone Staff, if you can pronounce that. Yeah, I know you got to recommend the pre-order one, or the deluxe edition, I should say, rather. But those will make a big difference in your damage to start. And then it's just basically about progressing through crafting. So if you equip one here, it will tell you the chain that you need to get. So this is the common willow wood staff, and then it shows the chain of how you can craft it and keep on advancing. These are pretty obvious when it comes in terms of your weapons, what to get next and why. So just collect the material and then go craft it at Keeper Shrine or a blacksmith. Now, armor is a little bit different, a little bit more choices and flexibility in it. This is also the deluxe edition. So Folk Opera 4-piece set. You can see every bit counts. Number 4 moderately increases will gain after defeating the enemy. By default, you're not going to have a whole lot of gear. In fact, your very first set's going to be like Tiger Hide Loincloth at 5 defense. And this thing here, if you did buy the thing, is going to give you 14 more defense, so that's going to be a lot. The 2 and the 4-piece sets, there's going to be 2, 3, and 4-piece sets, even a 1-piece. So if you mouse over it, it's going to tell you what you have to do. So they have unique effects, and they also have a 3-piece effect. The Serpent Scale is very, very nice because when health is low, slowly recover a small amount of health. If in water, the effect is enhanced. And it takes 3 to get the Wave Rider passive. So you can get this pretty early. And with a 3-piece, what you can do is get this Gray Wolf mask increased in the unique effect inflicts considerably more damage bonus on enemies at critical health. So that's a 1 and a 3-piece. You can combine pretty early on and have a decent amount of gear. So in summary, what you're going to start with is usually like the cotton or the basic thing. You have the pre-order bonus, you're going to look for Folk Opera. If not, look to obtain the Pilgrim's 4-piece set. Also, it has a 2-piece, so getting at least 2 pieces right away will increase sprint speed, awesome for your build. And then look to advance overall. Now you have what's called Curios, which is another piece to augment your build. I think the deluxe edition also has a wind chime with it, so slightly increased movement speed. That's a very good one just because more movement speed is great. And then this back scratcher is pretty easy to get a hold of early on, and it's going to considerably increase your stamina by plus 30. That's a massive amount. So more stamina recovery, good. And you'll continue to progress and get really fancy, awesome ones. But don't overthink, just the basic beginning ones can be very good. You can also get critical hit chance and then specific ones like chill resistance. So when you're struggling with the boss who has a specific elemental effect, don't forget to come in here and check these out and swap them in and out. Remember, you should fine-tune your builds for every single boss depending on what their mechanics are and depending on what their element is. This also goes for your drinks. So if you come in here, there's going to be all sorts of different medicines that you can drink to increase your focus, your critical hit chance, your critical hit damage, and also some medicine that you can take that removes chilled state or chill resistance for a short duration. So again, fine-tune your build depending on the individual boss and their specific status, both with drinks and with your Curios. Now, how you heal is your Gourd. This one here, Trailblazer Scarlet Gourd, when the Gourd is full, the first sip replenishes to full health. That is huge. Now you have a lot of options in terms of soaks. So you're going to progress and grab more and more soaks as you go. And you're also going to progress in different gourds. So this is your burst heal gourd that you're going to want to use if it's full. So you can see in the UI in the bottom left, it has 3 little dots. If I drink it, boop, it goes down a little bit. So that's what's going to happen with the gourd and what you need to be aware of when you're trying to heal. And those 3 dots are essentially for the soaks. See, that's a progression system in and of itself. And you come here to these keeper shrines after you progress for a while, and you'll be able to upgrade more and more things. If you come here to brew, you can see the different drinks that I have, and you can see the different soaks that I have. These also should be customized depending on your needs and or what you're struggling with specifically. Okay, so some general combat tips that you should be focusing on is the game revolves around light attacks, heavy attacks, and also comboing. So when you're playing, you want to do a couple consecutive attacks and then a heavy attack. Also, you want to focus on charging your heavy attacks once you get more focus built up, and you can unload to damage the boss. Now, when bosses are most vulnerable is when you want to take the time to charge and or to do the heavy attacks. This is primarily going to happen with experience and learning the mechanics of the boss. Ultimately, you should almost never be stationary in this game. Whether it's strafing, dodging, moving side to side, at an angle is your #1 priority when it comes to movement. When it comes to movement also, remember that you have a Cloud Step spell. Yes, it has a longer cooldown, but you can use mana to move in or out and get some pressure on the enemy or relieve pressure from you. So it's not just spam dodge 1,000 times. You can spam dodge 1 or twice to create some space using sprint to get away. You want to be aware of your stamina at all times and leave a little bit in the tank always for a necessary dodge. When it comes to range, you have a couple combinations that you can use, primarily your spirits. Some transformations also have abilities, but also the thrust stance. Once you unlock that, that will give you an ability to charge up an attack that will reach out a little bit further than the smash and or pillar stance. When it comes to survival, the basic is dodge, sprinting, and cloud step, combined with your Gourd. Even using that basic one to heal can help out a lot. Don't forget the consumables that you can get a hold of that passively give you a boost to offense or defense, especially the status effects when you're facing particular boss where it's obvious what status they are, whether that's chill, fire, and so on. And learn to practice perfect dodging. This will come as you learn the mechanics of the individual bosses and or enemies. And don't spam dodge. You may need to use it once or twice to get away, but stamina is your #1 resource. Even if you have 0 talents or 0 knowledge on how to play this game, just dodging appropriately can get you big carry through almost any of these encounters. Couple light attacks, heavy attacks, reevaluate, because these bosses and enemies about every 3 to 5 seconds are going to attack you. So don't be a button mashing spammer like me. Get in, get out, reevaluate, strafe, dodge, cloud step, immobilize to lock an enemy in place, charge up them heavy attacks with big focus, and rip this game. Well, gang, I hope this gives you an idea of what to do and what to progress. If you got something out of it, hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe, leave me a comment, and check the links in the description below. Thanks for watching.